Are the Celts really Scythians or Scythians? Hi, I'm Kevin McLean. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out our Patreon page or the website with a donation button. It really helps us out. Now, this is a claim that you'll see throughout the internet, and especially here on YouTube, various conspiracies around it. Now, of course, there are historical sources that suggest this. The story given in something like the Linguistic says as much, right? But it depends on if we want to take that as a factual account of the actual origins of a people. And I would suggest not. Now, I did do a video in the past that I since removed because people misunderstood what I was saying. I said, well, in a way they are related to the Scythians, but what I was talking about was not that that story was factually true, but suggesting that they had a memory of a people coming from somewhere else in the East, and that memory may have persisted in folk tales and so on. That's quite possible in my opinion. But that's not to say that the story as presented is accurate, or that they are actually Scythians. Scythians are a later group of people that also descended from Indo-Europeans. So they're related linguistically to Indo-Europeans, but they're a completely separate population. So this also ties into this idea that the Celts are some sort of secret lost tribe of Israel, and that they're really Hebrews or Israelites. And there used to be years back some people claiming that there was genetic proof of this. Now, there is no genetic proof of this whatsoever, and any such claims have been thoroughly debunked by geneticists, and I'm not here as a geneticist to tell you. But historically, we can say that it's very, very unlikely, and that much of the reason why they have tried to make this claim is based on stories like what one finds in the Linguistic, which suggests that they had some sort of ties to the Israelites, to the Hebrews, and that they just descended directly from Noah. Now, of course, this is what Christians in the medieval period thought, because they truly believed in the biblical accounts as written in the Old Testament. And so, although a lot of sophisticated Christians at that time did understand that there's a deeper meaning to the Bible, and there was symbolism involved in understanding it and so on, but nevertheless they also understood it literally. So it wasn't that they only symbolically understood it, it's that they symbolically understood it, but they also literally believed it. So they thought that the two things went together. And so, of course, if you literally believe that the Bible is a true account of history, then you also have to try to fit the origin of your population into that narrative. And that is what works like the Linguistic tries to do. And that's why you end up with these euphemized gods that are presented as ancient kings, and why they can trace their lineage back to Noah. Now, the Celts and the Irish specifically didn't only do this with their own deities, they even did it with Roman deities. So you will find translations of various Roman texts, like from pagan times, and they will present the genealogies of Roman figures, tracing lineages back to Apollo, or back to Sol, or back to Jupiter. But then they will go on and they will trace the lineage of Jupiter back to Noah as well. So it's not only the case that they did it with themselves, they did it with every single thing that they encountered. They tried to create a kind of genealogy that would validate the picture that's presented in the Old Testament, because they were so devoted to believing that that was the true account. Now, of course, they also believed that their own account was true. So this is why they couldn't completely abandon their own account. And they tried to fit these two things together. Their own genealogies and try to fit them into this biblical genealogy. And you get this strange mishmash of things. But out of that, you get a lot of preserved information too that we wouldn't have otherwise. But to think that this story is literally true, that they were basically descendants of Noah, and that they became kings of Scythia, and then that they eventually came back towards Ireland, but not before stopping off and picking up a pharaoh's daughter in Egypt. To believe that this is factually true, I think takes an extreme leap of faith. You'd be better off believing the account of the Bible as being factually true. So, no, they are not a lost tribe of Israel, nor are they Scythians. But there were similarities between Scythians and between Celts. And at some point in time, they may have even had direct sort of relations. So along the Danube, in the east, they might have actually had direct contact with various Indo-Iranic tribes. It's quite possible. And some of the elements of some of their culture, from what we get from iconography at least, and what we get from stories, are somewhat similar. But nevertheless, I don't think we can claim that they are identical. They are similar in that they practice similar things, that they originated from a similar host population, the Indo-Europeans. But in many other respects, they're not alike. Now, in that account, there may be, I think, an element that remembers various invasions that took place from Iberia into Ireland. Now, it seems likely that such a population transfer happened at some point, with small elite warrior bands perhaps raiding Ireland, or perhaps remembering a trading relationship that they had in the late Bronze Age, which did exist as part of the Atlantic Bronze Age system, where all of these nations, Britain, Ireland, and parts of Iberia, were in direct trade relation with each other. And we can expect that they were also exchanging cultural ideas. They were probably marrying in with each other's daughters and so on, right? As is usual practice between trading allies. You try to secure relations by marrying the daughter of a chieftain or a king. Now, another claim that's related to these claims is that the Irish were extremely influenced by Phoenicians, and that these Phoenicians had direct influence, and even the gods of the Irish were really Phoenician gods. And they use the example of Beltane, and they say, well, Bel really comes from Baal, the Phoenician god, a Phoenician solar god. Although whether it's really even a solar god, Baal means a whole bunch of different deities. And so they try to link this Phoenician deity back to the Hebrew, because the Phoenicians and the Hebrews are very similar, or maybe they came out of the same sort of population groups at one point. Nevertheless, they're distinct, I think, by the time of our historical sources. But anyway, they try to make this link that, so the Irish were influenced by Phoenicians, which there's no evidence for at all, and therefore they're really these lost Israelite tribe. These notions are very similar to people who search for Atlantis, right? There's very little to go on. There's just some old legends, and then from that they take that it's real, and then they go out to try to prove it. But of course there's nothing really to prove it, but because it never existed, there's nothing really to disprove it. But in this case, there is many things to disprove it, such as language, such as culture, such as genetics, that all say that there was no connection between these people whatsoever. But the one thing that they'll drag out, and I've seen it done many, many times, is that they say, well, the Celtic language is exactly like the Hebrew language. It's a Semitic language. This is absolutely false. There is 0 Semitic words in any Celtic language, unless they were borrowed at a later period through biblical stuff, which happened. But in, Proto-Celtic or anything like that, there's no Semitic words. Now, what they say is that, well, because it's VSO word order in Irish and in Brythonic, and only those languages, then that means it's related to the Semitic languages. No, it doesn't mean that whatsoever. It simply means that it has a VSO word order, verb, subject, object, word order. Now, why Insular Celtic specifically adopted a VSO word order, nobody's quite sure. Some people say, well, it was influenced by the prior population. Maybe it was. But were those people speaking a Semitic language? If they were, it wouldn't have been one that would be recognizable to us. It would have been like proto-Semitic. Like we're talking about the first farmers here. So unless you're saying that all of the first farmer people throughout all of Western Europe were speaking some form of Semitic language that was a VSO word order, then maybe. But I don't know. It just seems like a very far-fetched thing. The word order, even if it was influenced by a prior language, which in and of itself is not proven at all, could just be one of these things that happens. Local people start speaking a particular way, and it catches on and spreads. I mean, that's really all it takes. It's likely that this happened specifically because of the connections between Britain, Ireland, and Iberia. In Iberia, it seems that the Iberian Celtic language was also VSO word order. So it's very likely that in the late Bronze Age, that's when this trend developed. And it developed out of the various connections between Britain, Ireland, and Iberia. But again, the people in Iberia at that time were not Semitic. So, and they were specifically trading and dealing with other Celtic populations there. So it's, again, you're going out on leaps here, because the Phoenicians didn't come into Iberia until after the collapse of the Bronze Age networks. So we're talking around 700 BC and later. So it would have been after the period when these cultures did have direct contacts with each other, because in the Iron Age it seems that contact was basically lost between Ireland and Iberia. Anyhow, I hope you found this interesting. I'd like to give a big thank you to my Patreon subscribers. If you liked the video, please share, subscribe. Gurv mi lamagat, Seisha, Agus Marigoni, Shas Skohard.